Here we are at Spiritual Conversations, and today's topic is Pope Francis, the rock star. I thought it was timely to put up this topic because Pope Francis has been, he's done his trip to the US, which makes him quite topical at the moment in that part of the world. And he seems to have been quite topical ever since he became the Pope anyway. And I know that I think just today they are finishing the synod on the family in Rome, where our Darwin bishop was one of the two bishops in Australia to be invited to that synod. So we were all cheering along for our Bishop Eugene to go along. We thought, great, the NT makes its stamp in some form. So in starting off today's topic, I suppose the first question is, I'm interested to know, what do you think of Pope Francis? What are your thoughts about him? And maybe we'll start off around the top there, or at least you're in the top in my screen, Jeremy. What do you think of Pope Francis?
Well, thanks, Margaret. It's a good question. And, as someone who's Catholic, I've had a particular affinity for this Pope. I'm amazed just keeping up with his Twitter feed. And, it's one thing to write a pithy statement, but it's another to be able to put it in 140 characters or less. And then it's quite another to actually keep up with those and be able to, read them and, favorite them, retweet them, read them in different languages, learn French and other languages too. So there's the multilingual aspect. There's I think he's connected with a lot of us powerfully in, having greater concern for the poor, fostering peace, trying to build bridges with each other instead of, everybody trying to smack each other in the head over, whatever random disagreement you could come up with. But I think, we've seen some progress with peace efforts that he's fostered, but I'm amazed at how much he's done. He's also an inspiration to me. I have asthma, and he has one lung. So to see someone with one lung be able to do all this, it's just an inspiration that, I think all of us, we try to dig deep and feel like we should do more to help and serve others.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. It's interesting you raised his Twitter feed, because I looked up, I'd read something about he outdoes Justin Bieber on Twitter.
Yeah.
He's got a bigger fan base than Justin Bieber has.
Right.
So
and then he has it in all different languages too. So, German, French, Spanish, Italian. I'm probably missing a couple. So, yeah.
Wow. So, Wendy, what are your thoughts? What do you think of the Pope?
Well, I jumped in here because I love the conversations you start, and I wouldn't say that I have a lot of opinions on it, other than I think any leader that kind of magnetizes people in a loving and non-judgmental way these days is pretty incredible. And my opinion of what I've heard of him and quotes I've seen from him is he's progressive. And I think that's been a long time coming, in any religious arena, is to be progressive and not so inclusive and exclusive. And I think we're getting to that point where leaders are serving as bridges instead of, I don't know the alternate word for that, but we're bridging to accept and include all people instead of being so inclusive. And he seems to definitely have that about him, which I think is inviting and welcoming strangers to spirituality, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
I would rather use spirituality than religion, as you can tell.
Yeah. No. Yeah, great comments. Thank you. Vin, what are your thoughts on the Pope?
Well, I don't know a lot about the previous popes, but I think the thing that separates him in most people's eyes is that, as Jeremy was saying, he does like to help the poor, and that seems to be a focus of this pope more than the other popes. And also, the one thing that stands out for me is that, didn't he say something about giving away all of the church's money to charity or something like that? Like he was very willing to let go of all of the wealth that they've been collecting, or have I got that wrong?
I don't know exactly if that's the case, but I know that he has made several statements against capitalism and materialism. So whether that, he's made statements on the church as well in that regard, I actually don't know. But, look, I think in terms of popes, and I've been raised a Catholic, and so I've known pretty well all the popes along the way. I haven't been the best of Catholics, but I actually went to the Pope's Mass when I was a younger girl, and our school was picked as one of the choirs to be in the combined schools choir to greet the Pope on his Australian visit. And the Mass was held at Randwick Racecourse because it was the largest venue. So I remember going along there, but, back in the day, popes, to me, were always high and mighty and pomp and ceremony, and they were not reachable. They were not relatable. And I felt that they were... that they weren't part of my world. They just didn't, tread the same ground. And so I find that Pope Francis is quite a different sort of a pope in that regard, because he seems to want to mingle with the people. Like in America, in his trip to the States, I saw footage where he actually got out. He told the motorcade to stop, and he got out of his car and he wanted to greet the people. Mm. So he's certainly wanting to be one of the regular people, and even like the moment he was, I don't know, it's not ordained. What is it when you become a pope? But when it was announced that he was the pope, and he wouldn't take the limousine. He went and got the bus with all the other cardinals. And I thought that was just amazing. I would never think of a pope doing that. So for me, he is breaking pretty well all of the rules that have gone before, or the traditions with all the other popes. I'm just, Mark made a comment before that he's done a few good things. There it is. I'll have full respect when he cleans the house of pedophile priests the church continues to hide. Yeah, so, well, let's comment on that particular comment.
I was going to give up my seat so that some of your other guests could comment if that works. And I'm happy to come back in, but it looks like you have a good group of people here that maybe have some more experience with the Pope. So thank you for letting me jump in.
Thanks for popping in, Wendy. Thanks so much. Always lovely to have
watching and commenting, but thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So Mark, if you want to come in, or anyone else there, there's Raymond. Feel free. Mark, good on you.
Hey, hi everybody. Hi Margaret.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Yay, good to see you.
Thanks for welcoming me in.
Well, you've always got something interesting to say, Mark. I can always guarantee.
I'll always bring the snark.
Be careful. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, be careful. I've made Jeremy a co-host. He was the first one.
You got to watch out for lawyers. We're trouble. So, anyway.
Yeah. My take is, so I think the man is sincere, first of all. I think he's for real. I don't think this is an act or anything like that. I don't get any impression of that at all. I do see, and I want to accentuate the positive in terms of, I understand that the old expression, Rome wasn't built in a day. And in this case, maybe literally Rome wasn't dismantled in a day. Because I'm one that tends these days to see most things about organized religion as not being something that we really need or is very positive in the earth, but it's a reality. It's here, and still the great majority of the earth's population is associated with one of these religions, and Roman Catholicism, though it's come way down from what it once was, still is a major force and a major player. So I've got to applaud anything that's progressive, anything that's moving in what I think are the right directions. But it does, my comment in the side chat was just that, I keep hearing in these kind of discussions like, oh, he's so wonderful and it's so great and it's so, he's just so nice and he's making everybody loves him and it's progressive like that. And I'm thinking there are still huge problems in the Catholic Church. There's huge scandals with corruption. There's the biggest thing to me, and the biggest, just horror to me, is the pedophile scandals that are still going on. There's still priests being hidden away, and instead of being turned over to the authorities and published the full extent of the law, which people who prey on children deserve, the church is hiding them, covering up for them, sending them to South America. That crap is still going on. And
that's a societal problem, though, Mark.
Well, but it's a problem for the Catholic Church. It's a societal problem, and this man is the head. And I'm saying
it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that. It's a societal problem that needs to be pulled out by the roots in all of society, not just within the Catholic Church.
But an institution,
it goes through the whole world. Okay,
you cannot say that and then say that the institution where this is happening, an institution where it has clearly happened and where it is well documented that cases are still being swept under the rug, still not being dealt with the way they would be in anywhere else, that the man who's at the head of that, if he really is speaking prophetically, as so many people say, says he should be going after this with a vengeance. He should be cleaning this with a broom. I'm not seeing that happening, and that's concerning to me. There's other issues, that I know the Catholic Church is going to take decades to get there. There's issues with gays, with women, that I know that's not going to change overnight. But this one, this is not a matter of doctrine. There's no doctrine in the church that protects priests who prey on children. This is what I don't understand, is why this man who's the head of this thing doesn't take this by the horns and do what needs to be done.
Well, I come back to your first comment, Mark, which I thought was a great one. Rome wasn't built in a day. That's absolutely profound in this context. And he's been the Pope just a short while.
Yeah, and I understand what Jeremy is saying, and Susie in the chat says, Pope Francis can only do so much. He has lots of objection from the Vatican. Right there, yes, that there's objection within the Vatican to exposing and turning over to the law priests, men who have preyed on children. That's what I'm going to get passionate about this, because this is not talking about, we can argue about whether or not, gays are sinners, or whether or not women should be priests and leaders in the church and things like that. That's all, those are academic arguments. This is children. And, he can't, Susie, he can't maybe change that overnight, but he could damn well speak out about it. He could damn well say, this is horror. This is not going to, and this is not going to stop. He said little things about it. He's made some movements toward it. In any other thing, in any other institution on earth, if children were being preyed upon by people in the organization, and that organization didn't immediately deal with that in the most severe possible terms instead of trying to cover it up, we would be horrified. But because it's a church, it gets a free pass. I have to
disagree with you there, Mark, because I have heard several statements coming from the Pope about his disgust, his remorse. The children are the very people we need to protect. They are actually on the list of one of the seven areas that he is focusing on: protection of the children.
Well, I would say that, there needs to be, I would just say there needs to be more than a sense of horror and disgust. If he has any authority at all, why isn't it being brought to bear on this issue?
Well, maybe that's the key question there. How much authority does he have? And, just like President Obama made all these sorts of promises as like he's going to, leave. He got voted in on the promise that he would get troops out of the war and end the war. He would close down Guantanamo Bay. Those were the things that he was elected on. Yeah. And he seemed very passionate about those. And yet when he came to power, it seemed like he had his hands tied, and it's a big thing. It's not just a small business or something.
That's a good analogy, Vic, and I appreciate that. I think maybe my the thought that I have broader is, I would love to see Pope Francis speak out even stronger against it, but I appreciate if he has at least spoken out, and maybe there are things I'm not understanding about the limits of his power politically within the church. But if I were a Catholic, I wouldn't be sitting still. I wouldn't wait for things to move. I would, I don't know if I could, I couldn't be a Catholic. I could not be a Catholic because of this issue alone. That amount of horror within an institution, I would not have my name associated with it. But, when I hear people saying, it's moving, it's changing, it's the society, this is children we're talking about. This is men taking advantage of children and it being condoned within an organization for the most part. Not everybody within the organization, but it has been. We know it's been covered up. It's been, and I don't hear enough within the church and from members of the church. I don't hear enough outrage at it. And I think I don't want to turn this whole discussion into that, but.
And I think that's going to change. Let me ask you a question, Mark, and maybe this is a productive question that might help flesh this out a little bit. I mean, would you agree that the scandals you're talking about, that they're a form of corruption?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, then you have to read the Pope's tweets. 2 days ago, he tweeted that corruption is a cancer in society and needs to be removed. I mean, he can go there from that tweet. He can go there with synod documents. He can go there with further action. I mean, he's probably, you look at the problem. If you're trying to pull something out by the roots like this, you have to figure out how to do it and how to do it effectively. And then if there's resistance, you have to deal with that. And trying to get some kind of agreement on something that major, I mean, that could be difficult. But I guess I'm kind of wondering if it's a form of corruption, maybe it could be dealt with in that fashion to some extent, at least to try to reach some agreement as to how it should be dealt with and prevented in the future.
That's fair enough. And I would love to.
2 days ago, I also heard that he deposed of one of his senior people in the Vatican because of an element of corruption. So I think he is seeking it out, sniffing it out, and we know with any form of corruption, the details and the people responsible can be very well hidden and very hard to find. And so it is going about it in some systematic way or a conscientious way in order to bring out of the woodwork what is well hidden.
I certainly hope you guys are correct. I hope that you're right. I hope that Be More You in the chat who says that maybe the rock star status may allow a lot more to be done moving forward. I hope that's what's really happening. And I hope that it's a matter of that this guy is wise and he's smart and he knows like this is a huge ship he's trying to turn. And maybe he cares about this a lot more than I think. That I hope all those things are true. I would just love to hear a lot more outrage about this from down in the benches Catholics. I don't hear that. And I think it should be something that if I were a Catholic and I could even stay in the church because of this, I would be every day. I would be, I would be talking to my priests, my bishops, my cardinals, anybody I could, until that letting them know that this is not tolerable and needs to be
outside of the church, Mark. What about
absolutely? But I'm talking. Yes, but we're talking. We're talking about the church, though. I'm saying if I was in that institution, I have to clean my own house first. And yes, I care about I believe what Jeremy said is absolutely true. This is systemic. It's societal. It's not just the church. And it's not something that's necessarily a function of the church. But it has happened within the church. And so I don't think the church can turn the light away from that and say well, it's a societal problem. No, you have to say, if you're truly prophetic, you say, we have this problem. This cancer, this corruption is within our own house. And so we need to clean our own house first. That's all I'm saying. And thank you so much, Margaret, for letting me come in. I do not want to hijack this. I want you guys to have the discussion you want to have.
Wonderful. You've always got really interesting perspectives and so much to offer. So I really appreciate you jumping in anyway.
And I thank you, all of you, for your perspectives. Maybe I'll try to listen with a little bit more patience, a little bit more of an ear. It's hard for me on this issue.
Yeah, and I know that we don't always agree, but I really appreciate the perspective. I heard a wonderful presentation of how we present our differences of opinions, and we generally take it as opposing sides, the adversarial sense that we're on opposite sides. And so, and it's always, and we say we go to war on everything, if we don't agree with it, we'll go to war on it. But I read, wouldn't it be lovely, instead of going to war because you have a difference of opinion, that we actually dance around the topic. We're dancing around it in our perspective. So I like to see it like that. I thought that was a beautiful way to express it. So thanks for being part of the dance.
Well, thank you. And thank you for welcoming me in again. And I just didn't want to see, this turn into a, which it could have been, just a love. Oh, he's so wonderful. He's so good, like that. When there are real problems. But what you what you brought to me, and I want to hear it, listen to it, is that, I need to understand maybe there's a lot more happening than I see. Maybe there are things going on, and it's a difficult process. Vin's analogy to the president may be a very apt one. That just because this person's a leader doesn't mean that they're all powerful. They're not a dictator. I would like to hear more outrage expressed at this. I would like this to be more of a focus, but I've said that. So,
can I make one point?
Sure.
I think what we need is we need a new societal paradigm. And in order to do that, you have to figure out what that would be and figure out where society's expectations are, and let's set them as high as possible. But let's reshape the paradigm for the whole world. Not just the church. We've got to the whole world has to be protected. Children all over the world, inside and outside of the Catholic Church, have to be protected.
I'm sure nobody here would disagree with that. The only reason I brought it in here is because the topic of the conversation isn't the whole spiritual conversation. What do you think about the whole world?
Yeah.
The topic is, what do you think about Pope Francis, the rock star? And
if I'd have put it something about protecting children in schools. I mean, that would be an interesting one too.
I would be just as passionate about that.
But is it all up to the school principal?
It's up to the. I used to work for the Catholic Church. It's up to the diocesan authorities, the church officials, the parent advisory boards, all of the above, and the bishops and archbishops and. But
I will just say the analogy to the principal or the president or anything like that is. and especially for a pope, is that he's in a person that, I use that word prophetic. I hope all of us here understand what I'm saying. I'm not talking about people telling the future. The traditional biblical sense of the word prophetic. A prophet speaks into the culture, speaks into the religion or whatever that he's in, and calls it upward, calls it to the fundamentals. And if the Pope has any position in the church, it is a prophetic position, right? He is in that sense, the chief prophet. He's to speak to that institution, that organization, that religion, and say, this is, call it back to God. And so I guess all that I've been saying, and I don't want to keep repeating myself, is that I would love to hear more and more clearly and with more anger and passion, prophetically speaking from the Pope on this particular issue. Maybe it's happening and I'm just not hearing it. I don't read all his tweets, but that's all I wanted to say. And I'm going to drop out because I want other people to go on. I don't want the whole evening to be about this, but thank you so much for letting me express that and make that part of the conversation here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremy. Nice to
meet you. Very much. Yeah.
I think that was excellent. It was really needed to be said. It's a topic that has to be a part of this conversation. And I just went and had a look at the Pope's tweets as Mark was talking, and I can't see anything really there. And you have to wonder, how much can you, I mean, you don't want to keep going on and on and on about it. He may have said his piece about it, and it's not constructive or useful. Perhaps he's thinking, or that the church thinks, to keep going on about it. Maybe it's like a marketing issue. But on that topic, it is actually bad publicity for the church, isn't it? That to have this scandal there. So, it's definitely something that is on everyone's minds, Catholic and non-Catholic.
Yeah. And look, I am a churchgoer, and when I'm not necessarily all the time churchgoer, but whenever I do attend church, invariably, it's almost every time that the people who have suffered abuse and their families are actually prayed for. And even, perpetrators or ways to move forward in a caring and safeguarding way. I think Elaine's having trouble here. So I do hear at the ground level people's sentiments that are expressed. And I don't know about you, Jeremy. I take it that you are a churchgoer. Elaine's having trouble getting in here, which is a shame.
Yes. Yeah, Elaine, you might want to either refresh or you could hop out and try to hop back in. We'll let you come back in. But yes, I'm a regular churchgoer, attend Mass every week. And the topic comes up from time to time, and it's a hard topic to deal with. When those scandals started hitting and piling up, I mean, it was a tough thing to handle. But we have to look at other societal things that the Pope is dealing with. War, for example, is wrong, and the Pope's dealing with that too.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Travis.
Hi, Travis.
It's a little hot here, sorry.
What are your thoughts? Are you at the beach?
Where are you, Travis?
No, it's just so hot in New York City these days.
I see.
I did volunteer work too, so I was like...
You've got to be joking.
What?
It's hot in New York City?
Yeah, it's 65, 75 degrees. I don't know. Crazy.
My daughter from Australia is over there right at this minute, and she says it's freezing.
From Northern Australia.
It's winter in Australia now, right? Or it's
wait, it's spring.
It's late spring or early spring. Early spring, yeah.
Uh-huh. So, Travis, what's your reaction to the Pope, and what about his visit to the States?
I don't know. I guess the Pope is better than the old popes. He seems to be, I mean, he's pushing the reality of climate change. He seems to have some newer interests, and he seems to be opening up discussion that I feel like a lot of religion tries to suppress in some ways. Like, they'd rather not talk about a lot of these like newer like social constructs that we have. But he still seems pretty backwards. He still doesn't think homosexuals are born that way, and still doesn't want, I think, females in the church, and I don't know.
Well,
so, I don't know. It's progress, but.
Yeah, I just checked up before this blab, actually, because today is the last day of the Synod on the family in the Vatican. And I just wanted to see if there was a statement that had come out of there, which there was. And they're now appointing a dedicated office position for the laity to be involved in the church. So this is opening up the church to more laity involvement. So people that are non-clergy, non-religious, to actually take positions of office, whatever that looks like. But at least they've now recognised and put in place a position to move that forward, which I think is a step in the right direction. And being a woman, yes, Mark, we're only observers, and to be honest, that gets up my nose. Why wouldn't it? If I'm to be a participant, I want to be an active participant in the full sense, as anybody else can be a participant and be engaged.
Right.
So, I would want the right to become a priest. The Church of England do that. But that could still be a little way forward. And we come back to Mark's comment that Rome wasn't built in a day. And I accept that. And I accept that there is movement in that direction. And now, with an office being established for laity involvement, I'm quite encouraged by that.
Yeah, it seems like churches in general are still very far behind the curve. I guess that's just kind of like how they work, right?
Well, don't churches have to have fundamental core values in order to help their congregations? Or do you think they should just shift in the wind every year and flip to a new page, see what happens? Is that what you think?
I'm not like, why do we even need churches anymore?
Well, how are you going to get out? How are you going to get through adversity without some kind of faith?
Well, I don't have any faith in anything, so
I'm just asking the question.
Well, I'd say that's another blab topic.
Yeah.
The fact is, like, I'm not questioning, why do we have churches? I do think that that's a whole big question on its own.
Why do we have so many types of churches when we only have one God, apparently?
That's a good question. That's actually a good question. And it would take hours to answer.
Yeah, and I think we've got some more blab topics here.
Yeah. Great questions, Trevor.
If we have so many churches and we have one method of evaluating whether our church is true, that being faith, can we really rely on that to come to the truth that our church is correct?
Yeah.
I think there's the problem of culture and customs are inseparably entwined with religion, and this is just, I'm speaking much more generally than just the Catholic Church, but it's true of the Catholic Church as well, I'm presuming. So, you know, it's very difficult to change things that people hold so dearly when it's about culture and customs, and tradition, I guess, is also wrapped up in that.
I mean, I do kind of like Catholicism because it allows man's reinterpretation of God's words, so it can evolve with the times, right? Whereas, like, if you took like a fundamental hardline stance that the Bible is true and it's like the word of God, then you can't really like reinterpret it, right? You'd still be saying like women can't talk, and like you'd have to do like the biblical definition of marriage and all these other things. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, like, why there are so many churches. Like, maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'd just like to bring it back to the church, the Catholic Church and the Pope, just to bring it back to topic, because I think you're asking some amazing questions, which have, I think, they're their own topic. And, you know, maybe I'll schedule one of the next blabs on that very topic. But to bring it back to, like, the fact of the matter is that we do have the churches in the world today. That's what we do have. And we do have a Pope. And right now it's Pope Francis. And so back to the topic was, you know, how, well, it was Pope Francis the rock star, so it can be anything about Pope Francis, I suppose, but
I guess
it's how effective is this Pope being?
How does the Pope, like, dictate new rules? Like, does he say that he's, like, representing God's voice? Or is, like, I don't really understand how that works. Like, I know he's voted in by all the other Catholic bishops, right? And he's by
the Cardinals, by the College of Cardinals,
right? All over the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so is he representing the Cardinals' views or God's views?
Well, like one of his recent statements was that everyone has their own idea of God. It was something like that we don't have a monopoly on that. And to me, that's another outreaching statement of his. That is, you know, he doesn't hold the you know, the God's own truth as to what God is all about. So I don't think that the Pope attempts to speak for God at all. Okay. I think that he attempts to work within the Church's values, what we all regard, I think, as good values, because he put it out in a statement to Congress or at the White House when he spoke, and he was talking about the American values, and if I can get some of them. Here we are. He said to Obama in the White House, I've just got it up here, his statement: "You are called to defend and preserve the dignity of your fellow citizens in the tireless and demanding pursuit of the common good, for which this is the chief aim of all politics. A political society endures when it seeks as a vocation to satisfy common needs by stimulating the growth of all its members, especially when in situations of greater vulnerability or risk." You're charged with taking care of the people. You've been invited, called, and convened by those who elected you. So I think he's putting the head of the American population in a similar capacity as himself as the head of the church, that he too is charged with this mission of justice, protecting the vulnerable, protecting all the citizens. I found his statement was merging the two roles almost as one, so that we do stand on common values. So I think, from that perspective, I think that he doesn't stand above any other leader. He doesn't see himself like that. He sees himself as one with other leaders who, struggle with the challenges that they have to deal with in trying to meet these values in practical ways. Yeah.
What can the Pope, I guess, actually achieve, though? Like, where does his power come from, and where does it go? I mean, does it affect Catholic doctrine? Does it change our minds?
I can see Travis's perspective there, and how it sort of conflicts with, well, maybe not conflicts, but it's a juxtaposition, I guess, from what you were saying before, Jeremy, about, you don't want the church to be able to just bend to any whimsy of society as it morphs and changes throughout one year to the next. It needs some solidity and consistency, and at the core of that, I believe, is the word of God from the Bible directly. So, how much power does he actually have to change things? And I mean, I don't really know. I'm just sort of asking the questions, and they may be very naive questions, but it does seem like a conflict there where you want change to happen, but how much change can happen?
And well, I think, Vin, you answered your own question earlier when Mark was here, that in likening it to Obama, he wants to make change. There is only so much he can do. There are other people involved that need to pass legislation or whatever it's called in the Vatican.
I guess the Bible is the Constitution in that analogy, and there are things that you can change without changing the Constitution. So similarly, you don't really have to change the Bible or go against it to change some other aspects. But I was just really curious and seriously wondering what as I guess, just as Travis just asked, what can he actually change? What power does he have? What can he change?
Well, he can change the rituals. He can change the issues at hand, and so we talked about the childhood sexual abuse. So he can. I think he can demand the focus there, the greater focus. He's called for this synod to occur. So he's called from bishops from around the world to come and talk about families in today's world and how that links in with the church. How are we grounded with families, because we can't, work in the same way we did last century with families.
And he can also change the text of the words used at Mass. For example, he inserted Saint Joseph, and this goes back to the family. You have Mary, Saint Joseph, and Jesus. And Saint Joseph's name wasn't in the prayers of the the saints whose invocations were invoked at Mass. And the Pope decided, well, that's going to be inserted. St. Joseph is going to be inserted because, it didn't make sense to be talking about St. Mary without St. Joseph. So, there are simple things like that. We had a translation of the Mass that changed recently in the past 3 or 4 years. And so a lot of us Catholics were having to use, cards, new cards to help us remember the new words and things like that. So, there are little things like that. A canon law, to some extent, might dictate to a limited extent what the Pope can do. There are things that are probably not going to change under canon law, and there are things that are, and I can't predict which ones, but canon law kind of limits, at least to some extent, what the Pope might be able to do. So, how broad this authority goes, I don't know if I could answer that question. That's a tough question.
An example is like divorce. In the Catholic Church, divorcees were never recognised in the Catholic Church once upon a time. That had to be overturned so that divorcees could be, come back into the church and receive all the sacraments. So those sorts of, rituals or rules and regulations that have come out of another time that I guess were relevant in that time. But I want to get back to Raymond's question. He's wondering what is driving the Pope's genuine popularity. and I can kick off because I have seen, I wish I had the website, but there's a website of just a cartoon. It's full of cartoons that are done on Pope Francis. And they're taken, obviously, with all cartoons, they're very, that they apply to what's happening in real life. That's what makes them funny. And one is, I'll describe it, I hope I can get the message across, is the big throne, the golden throne. That is the papal throne, I suppose. And so it's there, it's the empty throne. And the Pope comes by and he looks at it, and in the next little column of the cartoon, he walks past the throne. Having looked at it, he walks past it, and in the final little box of the cartoon, he's got his fold-up chair under his arm. and the throne is still empty. So I just think that's a classic. I think he's just so common as opposed to elevated.
So the people can connect with him and they identify with him because he's on their level. He's not a king.
Yeah, I felt like the old Pope was very much like behind the walls of the Vatican. He didn't really try to engage with people that much.
Which one? Which one, Travis?
Ratzer? I don't know. I didn't really follow him that much, but
okay. I'm just curious because we've had many popes.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was one in particular or not. That's why I was asking.
How many have we had in recent times?
Well, we've had, in my lifetime, we've had Pope Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis.
Now this one.
And Margaret has probably experienced more. I missed, Pope John the 23rd. And
John the 23rd, I was... Yeah.
Margaret's like 21, right?
Yeah, Jeremy, how old do you think I am?
I have no idea. I'm not a good guesser with age. I'd love to have you answer the same question with me, but I'm afraid of the answer. So, yeah. So we've had a few popes. I'm not sure.
I don't know that they're ever allowed to stop being a pope. I think they have to die. And like the pope before,
Benedict resigned, though.
yeah, and that was a first.
It was the first one in, I don't know, more than 500 years. There was a previous one, and there was a clue that, Pope Benedict went to this. I can't remember who the previous pope was that resigned, but he made some connection with that. Jeremy. Yeah, and then ended up. So that's the only resignation we've had in at least 500 years. I can't remember the exact number of years.
So is Pope Francis related in any way to that resignation? I mean, it was very strange because, as we said, it's so rare.
No.
Pope Francis did follow. Is there any connection?
No, as far as I know.
I don't think so.
Because all the cardinals have to re-elect. So it's back to square one. It's like if like when Harold Holt went missing in the eastern waters in Australia. He was our Prime Minister for a very short while and he was never found. And so it's back to the boards to vote for a new Prime Minister. So,
but going back to what you were saying before there, that, his humility, his common man connection is what makes him a rock star. But that's the opposite of a rock star. A rock star is elevated and praised and worshipped. So is he a common man or is he a rock star?
Well,
good question.
When he visit to the States, and I saw some footage of it in the news, and it was, the young girls were screaming, and that's another one of the cartoons. And they showed, they all wanted to get the photo, but they didn't want the photo; they wanted the selfie with him. And one of the cartoons, he's reaching out to say hi to them, and then they all turn around, and they've got their backs to him with their phones up to take a photo of them with him in the background. So,
and I think, with World Youth Day that happened in Rio, I think that did, for me, that kind of seemed to solidify that he at least had this rock star status, whatever that means. And that means a different thing within the church. A rock means something else than, rock and roll. So there's spiritual, upon this rock, I will build my church. I mean, that's biblical. So if we're talking about that kind of rock star, it might fit a little better. If we're talking about the kind that I think, Vin, that you were bringing up, I'm not sure. I'm not sure he really fits the mold. And I think that's why it's so tough for us to put a label or something on this Pope, because he doesn't resemble any Pope we've had recently, except maybe possibly Pope John the 23rd. But I wasn't alive for his papacy. Maybe Margaret could confirm if there's some similarity, at least on peace initiatives.
I would have been just a baby, Jeremy. I don't know that I remember, or not a very good Catholic, one or the other. But I think another reason that this Pope is so popular is because he's on the page with the issue. And I did a little research prior to the blab to ask that very question. About Pope Francis's popularity. And there were 7 points that I came across. The first point, love a cup of tea there, Travis. Good on you.
Just all thirsty.
Thanks.
To sugars, thanks, Travis.
So number 1, he's the people's Pope. Number 2, he's accepting of all people and accepting of the people that the church has previously shut out, such as, gays. He's very inclusive. Number 3, he goes out of his way to respond to people who reach out to him. So he actually responds to letters. He returns phone calls.
We'll call you.
And,
you might not expect it, but he could call you. Answer the phone.
Maybe he'll
answer
tweet.
the phone. Okay.
I actually include the Pontifex in the tweet about this conversation, hoping he'd show up.
Yeah. Well, somebody from the Vatican will probably watch this.
Yes.
Monitor Twitter. The Vatican's lawyer follows me on Twitter, so she'll probably watch it maybe.
And number 4, reconciling science with the Catholic Church.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Isn't that interesting? So he doesn't say that we're removed. He's actually bringing it together, and his statements on climate change. We need to get real with science. We need to heed science.
And to throw another one in, as Jeremy pointed out, he wants to abolish the death sentence. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, in Nebraska, the death penalty was just repealed, and it was amazing. The Pope had a stronger statement that came out against the death penalty right before that happened. I think that had an impact. Those battles are being fought all over the world. But that's one I pay particular attention to as an attorney and someone that used to do criminal defense, and seeing people convicted of crimes they weren't guilty of. It's something you think about more than maybe other people do.
Wow. What was that? Number 4. Number 5, he's relatable and he loves his soccer.
He does love soccer.
Relatable. Right. And the humility as part of being relatable. So he didn't want the limousine. He wanted to take the bus. Those examples like that. Number 6, he's aware of his power. And so he uses that in ways of connecting with other heads of groups, like heads of countries and heads of religion. And in Israel, his trip to Israel, he met with the heads of all of the different religions, and they were seen coming from the Wailing Wall together, having prayed at the Wailing Wall. And number 7, I've got. He's happy to he's in with the young people. He connects with the young people. He doesn't mind having the selfies taken, being part of that group. So they were the 7 aspects that I came up with as to why he is a popular pope.
Where did you find that list in a particular place, Margaret, or did you just compile it?
I will find it and I'll send you a tweet if you're interested.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to look at the list and kind of see how they came up with that.
Yeah. I can't recall, because I had a few documents going at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can't quite recall which one that was out of. So is there anything else anyone would like to say about our rock star? The reason I picked rock star is because he was, the challenge was, or not a challenge, but the statement was made that he's, if Justin Bieber had the same fan base as the Pope, he'd be laughing. He'd be really ecstatic. So I thought, well,
he has a lot of clout on social media. You look at his Twitter following and the number of retweets and all that. It just it's amazing. It's wonderful. People rely on social media for information more and more. It's wonderful to see that kind of he's engaging people in ways that I think we only had one previous pope that tweeted anything, and Pope Benedict didn't use it a whole lot. He used it a little, but I try to keep up with his tweets, and I have to set aside time to do it, or I fall behind.
Wow.
You don't want to miss something important.
I was just checking to see if he retweeted the tweet about this blab, but he didn't.
Not yet.
He must be in bed.
Yeah,
I wonder what
probably
time.
working right now.
Okay, well, we've done over the hour on this blab. So, any final comments about our Pope that anyone would like to put
How
in?
do you think the Pope could be better?
Ah, wow. Gosh, how could the Pope be better? Well,
I think. Go
yeah.
ahead. I'll let you answer first.
Well, yeah, I think I come back to that being that gender issue again, being a Christian woman.
Yeah.
I would like to think that women were, could have the same ranking, if you like, in positions in the church. I would like to see equity there. And, maybe that will come as well. I don't think it's the end of the road. Yeah.
Okay. More gender rates, yeah.
I think you're going to see more humility and simplicity from this Pope. I sense that. I can't really put my finger on it, but I think we're going to see more on that.
What does more humility mean?
More selfless, serving more people and being less about yourself and more about how many people you can help with a very limited time that we have here.
Do you think the Catholic Church is going to start using some of their money to help out more?
Who knows?
Okay.
Anything's possible.
Billions in their little city-state.
Well, that's how I started off. That I thought, I had heard that was the one thing that sort of stuck in my mind, that he was planning to get rid of some of the church's wealth by giving it to charities and giving it to the poor, but that there was some alarm, or some people were getting a bit worried about that within the church. But like I say, I'm not certain on the facts if that was just a rumor or not.
How do you think the Pope is going to react, or is reacting, to the younger generation that is much less religious now? My generation, I don't know really any strong Catholics anymore.
How old are you, Travis? Can you give us some perspective on? Okay.
1989. I mean, it seems like my peers aren't convinced that faith is reliable or useful. I'm curious, how it, I mean, and church attendance is obviously seems to be dropping pretty radically. How could Catholics make their church more popular? I mean,
Yeah.
Well, I understand that this is the end and Mark's trying to wrap it up, but, I would like to see if that is actually true. It might be true where you are, Travis, but I was speaking to a friend of mine in Bulgaria, and I was very surprised to hear that it's the adults that were not really that interested in church, and the younger generation are very interested in going to church, and there's quite a big increase.
Bulgaria.
Yeah, so I don't know how that differs with other countries around the world. I haven't really even looked, but I think certainly in the West, you're right, that there are declining numbers.
And it's a different story in Latin America too. I mean, you have you have a lot of Catholics there that are most of them are crazy about soccer. So you have kind of a sports commonality that some of them may have, but people are very hungry for faith in Latin America and Asia in particular. I don't know if any of you ever been to China, but that's one place where I was just amazed at, despite the risks of what could happen to these people, the efforts to which they attempted to go to church, even if that meant going underground and to the Catholic Church, where if you're discovered there, you can be killed. So, I mean, that's, we're lucky to have the freedom that we have here in the world, how much religious freedom we have. But I think Vin has a good point. I think different parts of the world might show different demographics. We're all going to see something different than each other on this, I would think, just based on us being in different parts of the world a little bit.
Yeah. Geez, we've got a lot of topics for future blabs, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. You've raised a lot of questions. So, good on you. So, I will wind it up because people have lots of things to do. And it's nighttime where you are. New York City, what's the time where you are, Travis?
12:45.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, thank you for popping in. So just quickly, if you want to run around and let people know where they can find you, because these blabs end up on my webpage. People can see the replays and they might get interested. So, Jeremy, a little bit about you. How can people find you, what you do?
Yeah, people can find me on Twitter at Jeremy P. Murphy. I also have a positivitypatrol.com website. I'm a coach and writer and also an attorney.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Travis.
I'm Travis Statham. You can find me on Facebook. The only other Travis Statham lives in Australia.
Hey.
He invited me to take a trip on his boat. I don't know if I'm going to do it.
Nice. I think we're going to take him up on it.
I would call myself a street epistemologist. I like to ask people how they know things to be true. No, not Travis Stratham, Travis Statham.
Oh, sorry, man.
Oh, whoops.
Hey.
Extra letter. Sorry. It's late. Actually, it's early there, but never mind.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I guess, why there's so much religion in the world. I don't think faith really makes much sense anymore. Like there's a God of the gaps that we take comfort in. Like when we don't know things, we like to say that we know God does those things. And it seems to me as countries become more affluent and wealthy and they provide a higher standard of living, people stop relying on faith to come to know things. That's at least my experience with my peers. So I'm just curious, like why people think they know things, and it's interesting to talk to people and hear their side of the story.
Thanks. Vin.
I am Vin Brown, and you can find me at vintuitive.com. And you can find me at Vintuitive everywhere, really. So I'm more active on Twitter if you just want to go there. I've popped my link into the chat there if you're interested. And so has Travis popped in his Facebook. Sorry for the misspelling of your name, Travis.
It brings up some old trauma.
And I'm Margaret Lambert, psychologist, author and speaker, and I run these spiritual conversations the same time each week. So I haven't set next week's topic yet, but might be one of Travis's questions.
One of many. Pick one.
Yeah, so thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it was really good to have your involvement. So have a good evening or rest of the day wherever you are, and catch you on the next blab.